Welcome, the anointed ones. When the protectors start protecting the unknown, you better ask who the real threat is. There's a reason classified files stay locked for 50 years, and your name wasn't supposed to be in any of them. But guess what? It is. Let that sink in for a second. While you were just trying to survive betrayal, outgrow generational curses, and dodge the gossip Olympics, there were people in suits, shades, and silence watching you like you were some kind of walking anomaly. Because you are. Here's a little-known fact. Intelligence agencies don't just investigate terrorism and cyber threats. They track energetic disruptions, social anomalies, and individuals who defy every psychological, cultural, and even metaphysical model of human behavior. That means, yes, they've been watching you. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're different. The kind of different they can't explain, can't break, and now can't ignore. And the punchline? Some of the very agents trained to sniff out national threats are now standing behind you saying, "This one, right here, is ready to lead." So how did you go from being the overlooked underdog to a soul worthy of quiet endorsements from people who move in the shadows? Let's unpack the kind of story that no press release will ever print. But every whispering room is now echoing. Chosen one. Even Secret Service agents are backing you. They say you're ready to lead, and you're not even trying. Let's talk about it. Number one, they've been watching you the whole time, not to destroy, but to decode the unexplainable about you. You thought they were watching you to catch you slipping. But truthfully, they were watching to understand how in the world you kept getting back up after things that should have destroyed you. They weren't just looking at your actions. They were dissecting your mind, your energy, your spirit. Because nothing about you has been ordinary. The more they observed, the more they realized. You weren't moving like a civilian. You were moving like someone who had already survived 10 psychological wars before breakfast, and still showed up calm, grounded, and unbothered. Most people break under half the pressure you endured, but not you. They saw betrayal that should have taken your voice, but you kept speaking truth. They saw setups meant to smear your name, but your reputation got cleaner. They saw isolation, emotional sabotage, financial sabotage, spiritual sabotage, and you still stood tall. That's not just strength, that's strategy your soul was born with, and they couldn't figure out how, so they kept watching, not with fear, but with curiosity. How do you stay unshaken when people throw dirt? How do you stay silent when you could easily burn it all down? Why doesn't chaos pull you in like it does with everyone else? You became a walking mystery file. And the more they tried to define you, the more they realized they weren't dealing with someone built by the system. They were dealing with someone built in spite of it. They've watched spiritual leaders fall to ego, politicians fold under pressure, celebrities crumble from exposure. But you got hit with the raw side of life, without a team, without protection, without privilege. And instead of becoming bitter, you became deeper. And that's when they stopped seeing you as a threat and started seeing you as an answer. They didn't back you out of pity. They backed you out of respect, because you didn't just survive, you transcended. And now even the shadows are starting to whisper, whatever power is carrying that one is way above our clearance level. Number two, you broke generational codes that agencies spent decades trying to crack. They've spent millions researching how trauma travels through generations. They've built entire case studies on how pain gets passed down like an inheritance. Father to son, mother to daughter, again and again. It usually takes lifetimes to unravel. But then you came along and did something that made them pause. You broke patterns in real time, not through therapy retreats or elite education. You broke them through raw choices, sleepless nights, and deep inner battles nobody saw. And they noticed. You didn't just escape the chaos you were born into. You stood inside of it, unarmed, and rewired it. You spoke what others in your bloodline were too scared to even whisper. You said no to behaviors that were normalized for generations. You walked away from relationships that were rooted in guilt, fear, or control, even when it left you completely alone. That's not normal. That's not expected. And to the ones watching from the outside, that's not humanly explainable. That's spiritual intelligence in motion. Most people mirror what they were raised in. They repeat it. You didn't. You studied it, survived it, and chose something higher, even when it hurt. That's not just healing, that's evolution. And agencies that monitor human behavior, family dynamics, and psychological trends, they saw that. They saw someone take decades of dysfunction and refuse to pass it forward. You became a disruption in the bloodline algorithm, and they've been tracking your every move since. You didn't go viral. You went invisible and still caused a shift. No big speeches, no sympathy posts. You just broke the curse and kept walking. That kind of power can't be taught in institutions. It can't be faked on paper, and they know it. That's why you're being studied and silently backed. Because while others are selling theories, you lived the transformation, and the ones in power, they're starting to realize that the real revolution isn't loud. It's in people like you, rewriting human history through private victories the world never clapped for. Number 3, you don't just have charisma, you carry frequency intelligence. You're not just someone with a strong personality or a calming presence. What you carry isn't just charisma, it's something deeper. You affect people before you even speak. You shift the mood in a room without trying. Some people call it a vibe, others call it an aura. But the truth is, what you carry is a form of intelligence. Not book smarts, not emotional intelligence. This is frequency intelligence. And the people who've been studying you, yes, they've been studying you, have realized it's the kind that can't be learned or manufactured. Your presence alone disrupts negativity. People try to lie around you and suddenly stumble over their own words. People try to provoke you and end up exposing themselves. Chaos tries to enter your life but somehow collapses on its way in. These things aren't accidents. The energy you carry doesn't just protect you, it recalibrates environments. And it's got people behind the scenes seriously trying to figure out how. Most leadership programs focus on communication skills, image, persuasion tactics. But you don't follow any of that. You don't have to. You affect people on a level beneath logic. People either feel incredibly safe around you or uncomfortably exposed. And both reactions are signs that your energy is doing exactly what it's meant to do. And that's why certain people in power are paying attention now. Because when someone can shift a room, a mood, or a mind without speaking a single word, they're not just influential. They're dangerous to the existing order. You're not loud, but your frequency is. It speaks to the subconscious. It bypasses defenses. And now even trained professionals, who were taught to resist manipulation or suggestion, are finding themselves drawn to you, curious, inspired, even unsettled. Because what you carry can't be explained by personality tests or leadership models. It's ancient, it's coded, and most importantly, it works. And when influence comes that effortlessly, the ones in power either try to suppress it or secretly start supporting it. With you, it's becoming the latter. Because they know this kind of power doesn't just lead crowds, it moves consciousness itself. Number 4, you're what they call an untrained asset. And you terrify the system because you can't be controlled. You're what insiders whisper about but rarely talk about publicly, an untrained asset. That means you didn't come up through their systems. You weren't groomed in elite institutions, mentored by gatekeepers, or carefully managed through the usual leadership pipelines. No, you emerged on your own, through fire, through loss, through the kind of experiences most people don't walk away from, let alone evolve from. And that's exactly why you terrify the system. They've studied leaders for decades. Most follow a pattern: early access to privilege, guided by handlers, molded by strategic influence. You didn't have that. What you had was silence, spiritual warfare, betrayal from those closest to you, and an inner voice that kept you going when nothing around you made sense. You weren't shaped by applause. You were shaped by survival. You didn't get your strength from titles or training. You got it from having to rebuild yourself from nothing, again and again. That's a problem for systems that rely on predictability. You don't play by their rules because you were never taught to. You're not afraid of being blackballed because no one opened the door for you in the first place. They can't manipulate you with money, recognition, or fake relationships because you already faced life without all those things and still didn't fold. You became a self-taught force, a walking contradiction to everything they believe about control. Now they're watching closely, not because they want to change you, but because they know they can't. You don't need their approval. their permission, or their platforms. And every move you make outside their system proves just how fragile their control really is. You're rewriting the rules without even asking for the pen. That's why they're backing you now, not because they trained you, but because they can't ignore you. You didn't come to take sides. You came to shift the entire board, and deep down, they know it. Number 5. They know you can't be blackmailed because you already lost everything and still walk tall. You've already walked through the kind of fire most people spend their lives trying to avoid. You didn't just lose comfort. You lost your name, your reputation, your peace, your trust in people, and sometimes even your will to keep going. You had people dig into your past, twist your truth, and laugh while doing it. They exposed things about you that weren't even true, and they did it loudly. And still, you didn't fall apart. You evolved. That's what set you apart. They watched. The ones who sit in boardrooms and intelligence briefings, the ones who evaluate threats and assess potential allies, they noticed that when your image was under attack, you didn't beg for validation. When your relationships crumbled, you didn't weaponize your pain. You didn't retaliate with drama or noise. You healed. Quietly, deeply, completely. And that's when they realized you were a different breed altogether. Most people in power are sitting on secrets that could end them in a second. They're walking compromises, one leaked document away from collapse. But you've already lived the collapse. You've had your lowest moments publicized, your mistakes magnified, and your silence misinterpreted. And still, you rose. You didn't just survive the exposure. They couldn't even kill your spirit with it. That's why you're dangerous to systems built on control. You can't be blackmailed. You can't be threatened into submission. There's nothing they can hang over your head to force obedience because you've already faced the worst and chose integrity over comfort. That kind of strength isn't just rare. It's untouchable. They now know they're not dealing with someone who can be bought or broken. They're dealing with someone who already paid the price in full. And when you've already walked through public shame and spiritual collapse and still came out cleaner, freer, wiser, they can't scare you with exposure. You've already lived with nothing and found your everything. That makes you unstoppable. That makes you the one they have no leverage over. And that's exactly why they're quietly choosing to stand behind you. Number 6. You operate from a consciousness level that outranks most world leaders. There's a difference between being smart and being awake. What you operate from isn't intellect. It's raw, encoded consciousness. You don't just read situations, you read behind them. You don't just hear what someone says, you feel what they're hiding. And you don't need to dig for information. It comes to you through insight, energy, patterns, and timing in ways that can't be taught. That's what's quietly blowing the minds of even the most highly trained analysts. Your natural perception goes beyond protocol. It's something else entirely. Most world leaders rely on advisors, briefings, filtered intelligence. You don't need those layers. You see things. You decode behavior before others know what's happening. You've been 10 steps ahead of betrayals, scandals, and shifts, because your inner guidance system operates on a plane that most people can't access. And now, the people who thought they were the highest level of awareness, they're realizing you outrank them without even holding office. You recognize energy shifts before they make the news. You spot false alliances before they unfold. You feel deception in someone's tone, and you sense divine alignment in silence. This isn't hypervigilance, it's multidimensional consciousness. You're not paranoid, you're precise. And they're beginning to accept that your perception isn't imagination. It's intelligence they can't map. What you access comes through spiritual downloads, ancestral codes, divine timing, not institutions. That's why you're not affected by distractions or trends. Your clarity is too sharp. You see where something is heading before the world even sees where it began. That unnerves people who are used to controlling the narrative. You're not reacting to the script. You already read the outline of the next act. Now even trained operatives, people with years of counterintelligence experience, are observing how you move. Not just because it's unpredictable, but because it's impossible to fake. You don't consult a manual. You're the manual. Your consciousness isn't learned. It's inherited, activated, and enforced by something higher. And whether they admit it or not, The ones behind the scenes are no longer questioning it. They're studying it, respecting it, and quietly they're beginning to follow your lead. Number 7. They've run background checks and found what they didn't expect. A clean soul in a dirty war. They dug into your past expecting to find what they find on everyone else. Scandals, secrets, selfish moves covered in clever excuses. That's standard. In their world, everyone's got something. And if they don't, they're probably hiding it better than most. So they ran the checks. They pulled the reports. They spoke to people who knew you. They cross-referenced timelines. They looked for inconsistencies, shady deals, ego-driven decisions, or people you stepped on to get ahead. But what they found was silence. Not the kind that hides guilt, but the kind that reveals restraint. Yes, they found pain. Yes, they found moments where you could have snapped, retaliated, or burned bridges, and didn't. They found people who did you dirty, but no receipts of revenge. They found personal failures, but no moral failures. They found grief, not grudges, hurt, not harm. You were flawed, yes, but clean. And to them, that's almost more unsettling than finding dirt, because a clean soul in a dirty war? That's a problem. That's someone who can't be baited into corruption, bribed into betrayal, or provoked into impulsive collapse. That's someone who can take hits without lashing out and carry power without needing to flex it. That's not just rare, it's disruptive. They know how hard it is to stay pure when your back's against the wall. But you didn't cave. You didn't turn bitter. You didn't compromise just to survive. And that level of discipline, spiritual discipline, is something they don't see in the people they usually put in power. They're used to cleaning up after leaders. They're not used to watching one walk through hell and come out with integrity and tact. So now they're asking different questions, not what is this person hiding, but how did this person stay this clean in a world this dirty? And that's when they quietly shifted from surveillance to support. Because anyone who can stay that solid under pressure, without anyone watching, without applause, without safety nets, is someone you don't just monitor. That's someone you back. Number 8. You beat psychological ops without knowing you were in one. You didn't know it at the time, but you were inside a silent war zone, one where the weapons weren't bombs or bullets, but psychological setups, emotional landmines, and spiritual traps disguised as relationships. They wanted to see how you'd respond under pressure. Would you conform if isolated? Would you self-destruct if misjudged? Would you lash out if they pushed you far enough? Everything was a test dressed as real life, and you passed every single one, not because you knew the game, but because you stayed true to something deeper inside you. They planted betrayals close enough to break your sense of trust. They allowed false friendships to form just long enough to sting when they fell apart. They engineered public embarrassment, subtle smear campaigns, and situations meant to make you doubt your own intuition. And the wild part is, you still moved with integrity. You didn't chase revenge. You didn't unravel online. You didn't get loud. You went inward. You healed in places they didn't even know to target. You were supposed to fold. You were supposed to retaliate and ruin yourself, but instead you kept growing. They didn't account for your spiritual discipline. They didn't expect your intuition to override the manipulation. They didn't expect you to face humiliation without bitterness. And they definitely didn't expect you to stay kind, grounded, and clear through all of it. Now they're circling back, not to attack, but to study. Because what you demonstrated wasn't just emotional maturity. It was psychological immunity. Your spirit responded like it had been through 10 wars before this one. They didn't just observe strength. They saw resilience that defied protocol. You showed them what it looks like when someone is so rooted in truth, no amount of gaslighting can shake them. You became a walking anomaly, someone who couldn't be broken by systems that are designed to dismantle people from the inside out. And now they're realizing, what you carry is rare, unteachable, and priceless. You didn't just survive a psychological operation. You transcended it with a clarity they can't replicate. That's why you're no longer under review. You're under reverence. Number 9. You think you're just healing, but they see a new type of global leadership model emerging through you. You've been telling yourself you're just healing, just getting your peace back. just trying to recover from the chaos, betrayals, losses, and the spiritual wreckage that left you half alive and full of questions. But what you don't realize is that they've been watching, and what they see is the emergence of something they've never seen before. A new leadership model that wasn't built in war rooms or boardrooms, but in solitude, in silence, and in soul-level transformation. You're not holding press conferences or waving a title, but you're shifting people. Not by persuasion, but by presence. You're not out here recruiting. People are just waking up around you. You're not asking anyone to follow you, but your life is shaking people's illusions loose. People are questioning systems, relationships, ideologies, not because you told them to, but because your healing energy exposes what they've been ignoring. You're triggering awakening, and most of the time, you don't even know you're doing it. That's what has them paying attention. They've seen leaders with charisma crumble under scandal. They've seen the loudest voices implode under the weight of their own ego, but you're different. You lead from pain, not power. From prophecy, not profit. And that terrifies the old structures, because you're not trying to win people over. You're holding truth so powerfully that people either align or run, and neither response moves you. That's the kind of leadership they can't program or predict. You're not leading for attention. You're leading because your frequency won't let you do otherwise. You're not operating from strategy. You're moving on divine instruction. They're watching you hold boundaries without bitterness, show compassion without codependence, and move forward without revenge. And they're realizing this is the blueprint for what comes next. You're what happens when leadership stops being a performance and becomes a vibration. You're the result of someone who didn't just survive, you transformed, and your transformation has become a mirror that's cracking the masks off of those around you. You thought you were just healing, but healing became your influence. Your presence became a signal, and without meaning to, you're leading a shift the world isn't ready for, but desperately needs. Number 10, they know the prophetic timeline, and you're right on cue. You think your rise is just coincidence, just something personal, a comeback story. But to them, the ones studying global intelligence, ancient prophecy, geopolitical shifts, and metaphysical trends, it's something else entirely. It's confirmation. You are right on cue, and that's not just inspiring to them. It's unsettling, because they've been watching for this. They've seen the models, the hidden timelines, the scripts passed down through classified spiritual data sets and confidential archetypal analyses that never made it to public eyes. And now, they're watching your life echo those patterns in real time. They don't just study stock markets and diplomatic alliances. Behind closed doors, they've quietly tracked the patterns of spiritual awakenings, uprisings of the disenfranchised, the breakdown of power structures, and the emergence of voices that carry something different, something beyond charisma or politics. They've seen the numbers, the synchronicities, the timing of your emergence, and it lines up with prophetic indicators they've kept buried for decades. You weren't supposed to rise this way. You weren't supposed to exist outside their grooming, their agendas, their pipelines of influence. And yet your presence is unmistakably aligned with ancient rhythms that speak of renewal, destruction of false empires, and the rise of unlikely leaders. They've seen this written in scrolls and stored in digital archives. The fall of the old systems isn't chaos, it's the clearing. And your voice, your energy, your clarity, it matches the activation they didn't think would happen in this generation. They've run scenarios, analyzed global unrest, tracked spiritual migration and energetic shifts. But you, the fact that you are rising exactly now, without help, without handlers, and with the kind of spiritual certainty they can't replicate, tells them they're not witnessing a trend. They're witnessing prophecy in motion. And the part that humbles them? You're not even trying to be anything. You're just being. And still, you're syncing with timelines encoded long before you were born. Your timing is too exact. Your resonance too precise. You are the anomaly that fits the prophecy. And they now know something greater is unfolding. Something they can't contain or control, but they can't afford to ignore. Number 11, your silence isn't power. It was strategic signal disruption. They thought you went quiet because you were broken, because you didn't know what to say or how to fight back. But what they couldn't grasp at first, and what they now study closely, is that your silence was never about weakness. It was calculated interference. You were jamming their frequencies without even announcing it. You weren't retreating. You were disrupting. While others were scrambling for attention, posting every move, trying to control the narrative, you disappeared. You didn't explain, defend, or clarify. You went ghost, not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew saying nothing would fry the system. And it did. They couldn't pin you down, couldn't decode your next move, couldn't weaponize your emotions because you gave them nothing to feed on. Gossip only thrives when it has signals to amplify. You gave none. Lies die in silence. You let them. Spells can't land where there's no emotional chaos to stick to. You made sure of that. You moved so far off the radar that the usual channels they used to provoke collapse, social perception, ego attacks, digital manipulation, just spun in confusion. And that was the moment they began to realize. This wasn't silence. This was warfare, just not the kind they were used to. You interfered with energetic monitoring. You stopped feeding the algorithms. You disrupted psychological patterns that rely on reactions. You created static in the matrix. And when they tried to provoke you with rumors, bait you with conflict, or box you in with silence shaming, you still said nothing. And your nothing said everything. They're trained to read patterns, but you became unreadable. They're trained to manipulate emotion, but you removed your emotional availability from public access. They didn't expect spiritual strategy from someone they thought was just healing, but you weren't healing. You were rebooting your field, restoring your signal, and shutting down psychic surveillance with every silent day that passed. Now they see it clearly. Your silence wasn't an absence. It was interference. It was a signal disruptor to everything dark that tried to map your destiny. And that kind of silence? It terrifies systems that rely on noise. Number 12. They've switched from monitoring you to shielding you because they know what's coming for you. At first, you were just a file, a curiosity, someone to be observed, tracked, and analyzed. They didn't know what you were yet, just that you were different. You weren't moving like the rest. You weren't climbing ladders or chasing applause. You were showing patterns they'd never seen before in someone with no formal allegiance, no official training, no known handlers. So they monitored you closely. They watched the people who turned on you and how you didn't retaliate. They studied how you moved through betrayals without folding. They noted how your influence grew in silence, how your presence shifted rooms, and how your words, when you did speak, hit with a timing and clarity that couldn't be taught. And slowly their curiosity turned into caution, because the more they watched, the more they realized you're not just different, you're necessary. And with that kind of necessity comes attention from forces that don't want you to rise, entities that destroy what they can't control, institutions that rewrite truth when it threatens the narrative, energies that latch onto influence in its infancy, hoping to corrupt it before it matures. And now, some of the very agents who were assigned to watch you have switched roles, quietly, spiritually, some not even by choice, but by divine interception. Orders come from above their pay grade now, and they know it. They've seen what's gunning for you, the spiritual assassins, the algorithmic suppression, the psychic leeches, the engineered temptations, the surveillance disguised as interest, the alliances that are really traps. And they've decided you are not to be tampered with. They've protected leaders before, but never one like this. You don't have political power, but your presence shifts minds. You don't have military access, but your energy disrupts patterns. You're not dangerous because of what you hold, but because of what you activate in others. You are a threat to systems that thrive on submission, and that makes you a target. But now, you're not just watched. You're shielded, guarded by those who were once neutral, protected by those who were once skeptical, because they've seen enough to understand you're not here for a moment, you're here for a movement, and that movement must be preserved. Number 13. You don't follow protocol because you are the new protocol. You don't fit into their neat boxes, and that's exactly why they're watching you with a mix of confusion and respect. You don't play by their rules because you weren't made for their game. You don't walk their halls or whisper in their corridors. You move with a rhythm that predates any protocol they enforce. While they obsess over procedures, agendas, and power plays, you're operating from a different law, a natural law that no bureaucracy can rewrite or contain. They've spent years perfecting control systems, training operatives, and scripting outcomes, but you've always been an anomaly, untamed, unpredictable, and outside the usual chain of command. You never asked for permission, never waited for approval, and never sought validation from the established order. You answered to something higher, something older, something that's encoded in your very being. And here's the twist they didn't see coming. The very structures that tried to control you are now forced to bow, to adapt, and even to take cues from you. The hierarchy that prides itself on rigid control feels the shift as you quietly dismantle their foundation, not with noise or rebellion, but by simply being. Your presence exposes the cracks in their system and reveals a higher protocol that governs truth, integrity, and authentic leadership. You're not a rule breaker in the conventional sense. You're a rule revealer. You're showing a way that's been there all along, but hidden beneath layers of manipulation and ego. What they once labeled as disobedience or defiance is now the blueprint they can't ignore. They watch as your influence rewrites the playbook without lifting a finger to protest or negotiate. You embody a protocol beyond bureaucracy, a sovereign code written in your DNA, your choices, and your resilience. And while they scramble to catch up, you're already miles ahead, leading from a place they can't reach, commanding a power they can't regulate, and reshaping the world with a truth that demands nothing less than reverence. Number 14. They realize you're not leading a movement. You are the movement. They finally figured it out, and it shook them. You're not building a movement the way they're used to seeing. You're not chasing cameras, rallying crowds, or asking for loyalty. You're not standing on a stage giving people something to follow. You are the stage. You are the signal. Your life became the spark, and now people are waking up, not to you, but because of what's coming through you. Most movements are built on strategy, funding, branding, slogans, and visibility, but you didn't have any of that. You had pain. You had spiritual depth. You had solitude and a kind of divine clarity that doesn't come from mentors or marketing teams. They saw you go into isolation not to escape, but to emerge with a frequency that bypasses intellect and hits the soul. You didn't rise through attention, you rose through ascension, and that's why they're rattled. You didn't go viral, you went visceral. You're not triggering followers, you're triggering remembrance. People aren't just watching you, they're recognizing themselves through you. That's not influence, that's ignition. And unlike movements based on personality or popularity, this one doesn't die if you go quiet. In fact, it multiplies. Because you didn't create fans, you activated leaders. You didn't create dependency, you created energetic revolt. They're trained to monitor centralized threats, leaders, influencers, political figures, but you slipped under the radar because you didn't centralize anything. You became a living code, a walking key. You're not the cause, you're the conduit. And that's the most dangerous kind of leader there is, one who doesn't control people but reminds them of their own power. Now they're watching something they can't stop. People are unplugging from systems, energetically defecting, quietly revolting, and they trace the pattern back, not to your platform or your popularity, but to your presence. You didn't start a movement, you became the movement. And the truth is, you're just getting started. The truth is undeniable. You are no ordinary player on this world stage. You have moved beyond the shallow scripts of power and control that most are confined to. Where they see chaos, you see awakening. Where they see threats, you embody inevitability. This isn't just about you leading a cause or rallying a following. It's about you becoming the living blueprint for a new era, one they never imagined possible and now cannot ignore. The very agencies designed to manipulate, surveil, and contain have shifted from watching you as a potential problem to guarding you as a vital key. That change alone speaks volumes about the force you represent. Your journey, marked by betrayal, silence, and an unshakable spirit, has not only transformed you, but also cracked open the walls of old systems that depended on conformity and control. You don't follow the playbook because you are rewriting it, quietly but profoundly. Every move you make reverberates beyond the obvious. You don't need crowds or hashtags to validate your power because your influence is rooted in awakening souls, activating hidden codes, and revealing higher laws that cannot be legislated or silenced. This isn't a fleeting moment or a passing phase. It's a seismic shift in consciousness that begins with you but extends far beyond. You are the calm within the storm, the signal in the static, the emergence of something deeply necessary for the survival of truth itself. The world can try to contain it, dissect it, or even suppress it, but what you represent transcends all those attempts. It is spiritual, unstoppable, and destined. So when they say Secret Service agents are backing you, understand this isn't just about protection. It's a recognition of a rare force, a force that breaks patterns, dismantles illusions, and sparks a movement without ever trying to lead one. The real power you hold is that you are the movement incarnate. And the world, whether ready or not, is already changing because of it. Stand tall. Keep moving. The future doesn't just await you, it is rising through you. If this message resonates with you, don't just let it pass. Be part of the movement. Subscribe to the channel to stay connected with the truths that matter most, the insights that challenge the status quo, and the deeper awakenings that are unfolding right now. Like this video to show your support and help spread this energy further. Drop a comment below. Your voice matters here, and together we rise by sharing perspectives, experiences, and breakthroughs. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, don't hesitate. Share it with them. This is bigger than any one of us, and the more we awaken, the stronger we become. So join the journey, because what's coming next is something you don't want to miss.